Welcome to Introduction to Engineering Design. Today we're going to talk a little bit about splines, and specifically we're going to talk about how do we fully define a spline and what makes a spline fully defined by looking at how we control the handles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a sketch, and I've already got my screen set up here. So I'm going to start a sketch, and I've selected sketch, and I'm going to do it in the top plane. It doesn't really matter what plane you do your sketch in or your spline. It can be at any surface or plane. But for this example, I'm just going to choose a very simple spline. And I've got my spline tool selected. And I'm going to go ahead and drop 0.0, 0.1, and 0.2. So I've got 3 points on this spline. And then go select. So you'll see that as I click on each one of these points, I get what are called handles. And these handles do two things. They control the tangency direction and then the bias of the end of that spline line. So you can see that as I come up here, let me undo that real quick here. As I come up here and click on this origination spline line, I've only got one handle on this side. That's because the spline started out going in this direction. As I get to the center point, I can bias it both towards the origin or the start of the spline and the next point. And you'll see how these spline handles are interrelated. So you'll see moving one here moves the other. And it's interesting to play with a little bit. But when I look at this, this is underdefined, and it's kind of out of control. So let's say I want to make this symmetrical. So I can use the same set of tools that I've always used to make things symmetrical. And the first one I'm going to use is I'm going to use a center line to connect these 2 points. Because with that, I can now establish a relationship such as making them vertical above each other. Now I could do that in another fashion. Just by associating with the 2 points and making them vertical with an association between them. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and change this spline shape and pull it over. Now you'll see that when I did that, it changed the complete shape of the spline. But I can also detach and move things around. So right now they're moving in unison. They don't have to move in unison. But I want to make a symmetrical spline. So let me do this. Let me place these at the origin. So remember when we made things fully defined, one of the constraints that made an object fully defined was the fact that it had a location and a size. So I just gave a location for the start of my spline. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and associate these 2 handles and give it some symmetry. So I want to make both of my handle lines here so that they are horizontal. So I'll go ahead and click on the handle itself, and I'll choose horizontal on the top one, and I'll choose horizontal on the bottom one. So now what I've done is given them an association so they move together, and you can see they're still not the same size. I could bias one more than the other. So now what we can start to do is we can start to associate the size of these handles and look at the relationship. As I move my handle that associates with the top point, my top handle gets longer and my bottom one gets shorter. So I'm biasing the tangency or the handle on it. So let's give some dimensions to these handles. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose my top handle here with my dimension tool selected. And you'll see that's kind of an odd looking dimension. And I'm just going to go with the flow here. I'll make this 8 inches. I don't have anything predetermined. And I'm going to make the bottom one 8 inches. And what you're going to start to see is symmetry will establish. So now that I've made these 2 and given these 2 a size, you'll now see that I can still change the location of my midpoint, and I can still change some of the other relationships. Let me undo that. Didn't mean to do that. But what I can't really do is I can't change the orientation and the size because I've fully defined my top handle. So now let's go ahead and give a dimension to the location of my middle handle here. And I'm going to dimension this out, and I'm just going to dimension that out at 1 inch. And I'm going to give a length between my 2 handles, and I'll make this 2 inches. Now you start to see it become more and more defined. So I've defined a start point and end point, a length and an orientation for both those handles. So now all I have left to do is define this handle. And I'm going to give it now a vertical position, and I'm going to put a midpoint between the two. And when I did that, what just happened was my sketch became fully defined. Now notice that this handle appears to not be defined. And in fact, it isn't defined in its location. So the last thing I have to do is to give a bias to this and an orientation. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and make this a vertical orientation. And now all I have left to do is I could dimension this handle length. And I will make it 3. And that now fully defines everything in my sketch, and nothing moves anymore. My handles just don't move. So as I walk around and I try and grab things, nothing will move. So to fully define a sketch that has a spline within it, remember what we need to do is we need to define the start and the end points and each individual point within the spline, and then we need to define the handle lengths and locations. So there's a symmetrical, fully defined spline. Thanks for watching.